All right, welcome everybody to the last SWAG meeting of this year and this term. And thank you very much for being here tonight. I think we should start by doing a round of introductions. My name's Andrea Miko. I'm a Portsmouth resident and co-chair of the SWAG.
And I'm Dave Mears. I'm a state representative.
Vince Lombardi, City Councilor.
Rich DiBittimo, City of Portsmouth resident.
Mason Caceres, City of Portsmouth employee. I'm the Assistant Water Resource Manager.
Al Pratt, I'm the Water Resource Director for the city.
And Stephanie Secord, Public Information Officer for the city and scribe for this committee.
And then I think we have one SWAG member online, Kim.
Kim McNamara, the Director of the Portsmouth Health Department.
Great, thank you. All right, so the first thing we need to do is approve the minutes from our last meeting in October. And so I would need somebody to make a motion to do that. And I did share the draft with everybody through email.
Second.
Okay, so is everybody in favor of approving the October 2025 SWAG meeting minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Is anybody opposed to that? Okay, we'll go ahead and approve those minutes. Okay. So I think we are ready to get started on our meeting. Slides. We do have a guest speaker tonight. We have Mr. Ken Lynchy here from the school department who's going to give us an update on the lead testing. We've had the school department come to 2 other meetings in the past and share the work that they're doing, and we're really grateful that Ken has joined us tonight. Yeah, please come up.
Right here.
To provide us an update on where things are at with the school effort with lead testing. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Zach would love to be present as well, but has a family middle school and a concert tonight. So I'm here. So since we've last presented there, we have conducted all the rounds have been conducted, round 2, round 3, with a lot of post testing. With the recent testing that came positive in the first rounds, we've done a lot of fixture replacements. We've also installed reverse osmosis filtrations in a lot of the places. I think right now we're running about 19 of those throughout the school, mainly at Little Harbor School. That seemed to be the biggest trigger when we did the testing at Little Harbor. I think there's 17 outlets there. And then we did continue to increase or ramped up the water bubble fill station. So as of right now, district-wide, we have 36 filtrations, bottle fill stations throughout the schools, where no matter where the child walks into a hallway or a corridor, depending on which school, they're all throughout. And they are the ones that have the green, red, light, yellow system. So it kind of monitors and how many bottles are being filled. So then we know that life expectancy of that filter needs to be changed out. And we keep a significant amount of stock of filters, so we don't wait. Once it turns yellow, we change them out pretty quick. We can track. Custodial will put in a work order system as well, so we can kind of get an idea of not only is staff monitoring it, but we have custodians monitoring.
It looks like they were part of the testing program too, and they were all online.
Well, so that's for that point. No, we actually had one pop up, and that was at New Franklin, which was kind of odd. So we actually then ripped that bubble system back out and reinstalled a new one. Talking with LK, they say there is still that slight potential that based off the manufacturing of where that bubble is manufactured, there's still that potential to have a lead hit. They don't know how, they don't know why. The rep couldn't give me a full answer. But we went ahead and ripped that unit out, installed another brand new unit, and then tested that one as well. And so that is, points, I think 5 zeros and a 5 or something like that, the number that came back. So with that being said, we've fulfilled our agreement with the state for our testing of rounds. However, since we did the round testing a year ago, we will be looking to do another round of testing sometime in the next month or so. That gives us a year of systems running and see where we are and see the work that we've done to continue to monitor that, to make sure that we're trying to provide, the safe water to the kids throughout the buildings. We classrooms, even though students have access to the sinks, they don't use that for drinking. They actually, they've been trained to go outside to use the bubblers with the fill stations in the hallway. But as I said, in Little Harbor and a few other schools, they're also filtered as well. But there is still some slight hits of like a 2.1 or 1.3 or somewhere as in that realm as well. So we're still monitoring that as well. With that being said, we're also in discussion with the capital improvement plan of, you know, the long-term fix would be to resource the funds to replace the plumbing in the schools. However, as we all know, that's not an easy piece. You know, because you just can't run a pipe without opening up walls. And then, you know, so those are the things that we discuss, you know, knowing that New Franklin's coming up for renovation. So we will monitor as we open up the walls, we will look at certain things. We will look at the contractors as we replace fixtures to try to get ensured that they're lead free. You know, try to get that certification, how can we take the necessary steps as we start moving forward through the process. So, and then I'm usually I was talking to Elizabeth today with the state of DES. There's a couple information pieces on the post testing that somehow that I guess the testing lab is bought out by another company. So I just have to get them some updated information. But so we talk to them about once a month, every few weeks, just to make sure if there's what's new, what's coming out. There's no talks about round 4. So, you know, and so we're looking to say, well, if there's no talks, well, in good faith, we've had the hits. Let's continue to monitor and ensure that, you know, what we are doing is a good path. If it doesn't, then we have to redirect on how do we approach this. So, so we've done a lot of things in the last year and a half.
Great. Does anyone have any questions?
There's state funding available for schools.
There's state funding for once we do the work, like to replace the filters or the, you know, fixtures and things like that. There's no state funding yet for construction like projects for that. So we can get some reimbursement on that or the water bubblers, things like that. But I don't see, I mean, you're looking at millions.
Yeah.
Is that looking at?
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
If they were gonna
million.
start funding that.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, there is some state funding for construction. But there's so much limited funding and the list is so long
Mhm.
that, you know, we continue to shoot for whatever we can get for funding, and we will.
Do you know what type of media is used in those LK filters? Is it like carbon? Does anyone know the bubbler filling stations? It's not reverse osmosis, but
It could, in the LK bubblers, I'm not positive. I have the paperwork upstairs. I can scan it and send it to Al.
okay,
We're also using a filtration system that we got from Concord School recommendation. They're using as well. And this is just like a little canister type filter. We put it up under the classroom sink. We tie it into cold water and then goes right through. So it comes right from the pipe, goes up and through as well. So
is it designed for lead?
yes, it's designed for a lot of things.
Okay,
But we've seen some great results of, you know, reducing a significant amount of the lead, or if not all of it.
It's like a cartridge filter
Yeah.
with like micro pores.
Okay.
associated with that,
Yeah.
So
I can forward that information to Al, so you guys as well.
so will there be a round 4? You kind of alluded to, you might not be required to, but,
No, I don't think we're gonna be, we're not required to, but we will do another round of testing
and you think that'll be about when?
next couple months or so,
Okay,
you know.
cause round 3 was when?
Round 3 was a year ago, 2023, 24, 24, round 4 was 24.
Okay,
And then we had 5 hits that were just slightly, because we had a couple other sinks that we're not sure if it was a fixture issue or not. So we changed those out. And then, yeah, so 2024, so 23 was round 2, 24 is round 3, and then we'll go ahead. So kind of like a year apart.
okay,
And we did testing a year ago, December 18th, December 20th, somewhere right around there. So
okay.
it's just a matter of getting the bottles and the samples and schedule on a Saturday to do the testing.
And I remember with the first one, the testing was done in like August
Correct.
when it had been dormant, so
Correct. So
you're
that's
testing
why
during a more active period.
the period, yeah.
And then one other question, actually, Counselor Blaylock mentioned this, that there was like maybe a faucet that the sports teams were using that.
So we put a filtration on that as well. So if you look in the athletics trainer's office down by the field house, up on the wall right there, we had Hart Plumbing come in and tie in, and we put a filter, so that water's also filtered as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And we also did one into the other trainer's room up
Okay.
inside of the high school as well. So we look at other areas that it's sports or, some type of, like the band, we made sure we installed a bottle filtration in their area as well, knowing how volume of the kids during the summer and things like that. So we've been kind of strategically looking at areas and how we can provide filtered water as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have a question about showers and showers vaporize a lot of the water. Is that vapor? If there's lead in that vapor, is that a concern?
I'm not sure.
That's not really an issue. No.
It isn't, I don't
Vaporized,
know.
No.
Yeah. I'm
No,
not sure.
lead's a very heavy metal.
Yeah,
and
well,
that's not-
obviously.
Yeah, it's not volatile like that. It wouldn't turn into a gaseous state at any point.
Radon or something like that would, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
radon
Okay,
probably.
just wondering about all the showers in the schools and
Mhm.
the gym and stuff like that, yeah. I didn't want Rich to be poisoned.
No. I was gonna say that. Kids don't use the showers.
We used to in the day, but they don't do it anymore. Just go home stinky.
No?
For parents don't. But I know Shamara, the trainer at the high school, she's very happy to have the filtered water. She fills up, big jugs for all the sports teams. So when they get out of school, they're running down, with their empty water bottles and they're all getting filtered water now. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well,
I'll send you that information.
Great, thanks.
and have a great night.
You as well.
Thank you.
Stay warm.
Well, I'm sorry, Kim, did you have a question? I'm so sorry. Okay,
Thanks, Kim.
all right.
Well, the lockers must be right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. We can do laundry every week, but that's still not enough.
So we'll go to our slides. And so we also have another lead update that Mason will share with us on the city water side.
So it's gonna be short and sweet this time, just a few slides to run through. I would recommend for all of you and people out there in the void on the internet, go back to the last meeting that we had because the status of the inventory really hasn't changed much. But what has changed is us sending out these service line notification letters. If you could go to the next slide. On November 17th, we sent out about 2,300, a little over that, service line notification letters to all of those homeowners and property owners with unknown portions of service lines as well as galvanized that require replacement eventually. We highly recommend that they replace their privately owned portion of the galvanized steel service just because they're reaching the end of their lifespan. But we've talked about the complications with the water quality associated with galvanized lines as well. We know of 130 galvanized service lines that we have out in our system out of 8,600. So that's how many letters were sent out to those customers. For the customer-owned portion of the service line that is unknown, there were 442. And there was a different template letter for that really just prompted scheduling an inspection for someone from our water meter crew to go out and inspect that portion of their line. It's basically just what comes into their foundation of their home. And then for unknown on the city-owned portion of the service lines, that's where the majority of our unknowns are. There were over 1,700 that were sent out there. No further action at that time. It's really just to let them know that at some point we're going to have to pothole or excavate our portion of their service line at some point in the future. So out of all those letters that were sent out, they were received on the 21st. I've received over 80 calls and emails just in response to these letters. And within every single letter, there was reference to a free lead testing opportunity that the state has funded for everyone with an unknown portion of their line. And so, 33 people requested those kits, and we're going to be delivering those by the end of next week. Next slide, please.
Sorry, good job.
So as far as the identification of the city-owned portions of these unknown service lines, based on our last meeting, I started talking about how we're starting this initiative in developments where there are hotspots of unknowns. So Maple Haven is one of those hotspot areas where we have 132 unknowns in total. But through regulation, we're allowed to use a statistical analysis approach, so we can identify 36% of that targeted area, which means 48 randomized services we pothole to rule out the rest. Now, if we find a single galvanized service line within those 48, we have to pothole each one individually. We're going back to the entire sample pool rather than 36% of it. And we've identified 15 so far. They're all copper since we initiated that in October. So more work to be done there. We are planning on partnering with contractors. We're going to put out an RFP, hopefully toward the start of next year, so that we can be geared up and ready to go with, more than one vac truck to tackle these 1,700 unknowns, because we have to visually inspect them based on the rule.
Within 10 years.
Within 10
We have-
years.
Have time, but
Yes.
it's a lot to be potholing, so.
Yes.
we're gonna Start.
It's a huge effort. You want to go to the next slide? So as far as the lead testing data goes, really not much has changed. I presented this in our last meeting. But we did get our data back for the Pease Tradeport area. There were 21 samples that were collected from residential properties in Newington, but then businesses throughout the Tradeport area. And there was only one detection of lead at 1.2 parts per billion, which is considered low. The action level is at 15 parts per billion, so we were nowhere near that. And in that case, the 90th percentile for the Pease Tradeport area is 1 part per billion, just because of that one detection. And copper was very low, nowhere near the MCL of 1.3 parts per million for that max contaminant level associated with copper. Just a reminder, just based on our last meeting, between 2023 and now, we've had 85 locations with galvanized service lines that have collected and tested for lead. And out of those 85, 78 were non-detect, and we only had one exceedance of the action level beyond 15 parts per billion, which is really what that tells you is, historically speaking, with these galvanized steel service lines, they were connected to water mains using a lead connector or jumper, but we're not seeing that. And especially with the data that we're collecting, from these locations specifically, just because you have a galvanized line does not mean it's contaminated with lead. But there are many sources of lead that can be linked back to the internal plumbing of the property or the fixtures, as we all know. So that's something, with these letters that are being sent out, that's not explained in the contents of the letter, and it scares people when they see I have an unknown portion of my service line, it's contaminating my water with lead. There's a lot more to the conversation than just the service line being the responsible issue or source. So that's just something I'll end it with.
It's good that people are calling too, because it gives you the opportunity to
Yeah.
paper and educate them.
Yeah,
on sources, so.
Yeah. On the positive side, the little bit of fear tactic works to get people to do something,
Afraid of the unknown.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Kim has a question.
sure.
Thank you. If there is a child that has elevated blood lead levels, and I know that that's generally from almost exclusively from paint, but if that child already has a lead burden, and there's something found in the connection to the water to supply to their residence, does that put them, is there any sort of notification you get from the state lead program, or does that put them on a priority list for, if it's on the city side of things, for getting that connection changed out?
We are not notified of that at all. And it would be hard, really, it just takes testing the water to really understand, whether or not there's any sort of detection within that sample that they're collecting. Another thing that I should mention is just because you're collecting the sample at your property, and especially with the fact that there's more than one potential source of lead, it doesn't immediately tell you that it's coming from our portion or our side of the service line. There's a lot more investigation and diagnosis that has to go into the collection and the testing of your water. I mean, if you ran your water for 30 seconds, you're pulling a slug of water from a further extent of your internal plumbing, but also your service line, which could vary the result depending on whether or not there's a presence of lead. So even if that were the case and they were put on some sort of priority list, it would take, really dissecting how we're going to go about collecting and testing the sample to verify or further verify where it might be coming from.
Yeah.
But in short, no, we do not get notified.
Does the state notify you of any water testing that they do, or that, because if there's some sort of circle that can be closed here, if you hear of something from the state, we can be involved in that discussion of the sampling portion of it. Just follow up.
If that question's for me, the state does not notify the health department locally unless they need assistance going out to do some sort of immediate intervention or inspection. They do have a lead program that takes care of all of that. So we generally get the aggregate data and not the case-by-case data when they come in.
Okay. Good to know.
Anyone at any point in time can collect and test for lead with water from their home. And it's $20 a sample. So this whole free lead testing opportunity that's funded by the state, it's very specific to the service line inventory side of things. Technically, if we've identified the entire service, they don't qualify for the program. But in that case, that's when I have to let people know there's this lab close by that you can go to and request a sample. It's $20, and it will put your mind at ease. That's the only way you can know whether or not lead is contaminating your water in any way, is testing. So something to keep in mind, I guess.
Question for Kim. Kim, you remember when in Manchester, when we had an elevated child with elevated lead?
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, one of the things we did test the water as well as, all the other environmental things. Do you know if the state if we have a child in Portsmouth that tests, that's lead poison, lead burdened, do they test the water in the resident?
I think when they go, I think when the lead program goes out, they might take a sample of the water, but of course they're looking mostly for the paint issues. But the reason I ask the question is if you have a kid on chelation or you're just really trying to reduce their burden to get them back to health as soon as possible, every little source would be an important thing to track down and to test, as was just mentioned.
Yep, that's a good point.
I have a question about the detection at Pease. Was that like a new sampling location that you got that one?
Yes.
So you'd never tested that spot before?
Correct. Yeah. And it depends on where they're sampling from too. Especially with these businesses and these larger buildings, there's several break rooms and bathrooms, and we don't know the specifics of exactly where that is, but we do have the contact information to the person who sampled in the first place.
Okay.
So with something like that, I mean, regardless, we send out all these results to the individual facilities managers slash, property owners. And at that point, they're made aware of their results and what that means, and prompting follow-up if they have any other questions or concerns about it. Yes, so in short, yeah, it really just comes back to that.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, I'll have Rich go first and then.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Was the facility at Pease, was that a new building or one of the old Air Force existing buildings?
It was an existing building. I'm having a hard time. I would need to see the spreadsheet where I'm compiling the information and know which one it was specifically. But yes, it was a new sampling site for us that hadn't been sampled in the past. All of the properties and the buildings within that area are fairly new. I mean, like it's not like we're looking at a home that was built in the 50s or a property that was built that long ago. It's also very hard at that point to pinpoint, the source in that way too. It could be something as simple as the fixture was installed prior. I'm hearing that fixtures that were manufactured prior to 2013 have lead alloys associated with some. And in that case, that's that could be a potential issue for the detection. It's also it's low. That's a low detection of lead. We know that the service line, we've identified the entirety of every service line throughout the Pease Tradeport business complex. That's pretty well-known information. The majority of our unknowns for Pease, again, there's only a little over 300 service connections in the Pease Tradeport system. More of them are in Newington, like the residential property area. The businesses are well known and they're almost all copper. So it would be internal at that point. Yeah, Kim.
Well, you may have just answered my question. So we have some pretty large food and beverage producers out at Pease that we license. And so if there's testing that's going to be done on a continual basis until everything has been tested, if you got hits of lead in a water supply for one of a brewery or a large scale restaurant or something, would you notify the health department of that? Because currently we don't get any sort of data from the state or from internally when we're licensing restaurants. And, if all the buildings and connections are new, that might not even be a need. But what do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea. We haven't done that in the past. It kind of, lies with the company or the business that is carrying out the process, but also all of this data that is being collected is public information through DES One Stop. So at any point in time, and they're very rigid, routine sampling periods, I guess. Pease is always sampled in Q4. Pease, and we're the sampling agent for Newcastle as well. Both of those happen in Q4 of every year. For Portsmouth, it's Q3 of every year. And so there's a set amount of samples that we have to collect. We're required to collect as a public water system. Otherwise, we go into violation. We have to send out mass communication to all of our customers saying we did not comply with this rule or this regulation. But all of that data, even specific to the site that it was collected at, is on One Stop and the data associated with that.
Yeah, and there are requirements for the tiers of our sampling that are really for the whole lead and copper program that's designed for domestic. The first tier is houses that have lead that were,
that have a lead service line. That's the first tier. Basically, any property with a lead service line. The second tier is based on
Sage or something.
No, that's a multifamily property with either galvanized or
Lead.
lead. Third tier, which is what we're in right now, is galvanized requiring replacement at single family properties. The fourth tier is based on a year built date. So prior to, I believe, 1986, if they fall under that category as a property, then they would be selected
The one that has
for,
the lead solder as part of, if there's lead, there's a
Yeah.
likelihood of lead solder, and that's where that date comes from.
that's four. That's four, if not five. And then tier five is basically everything else, including unknown locations. So just real quick, you have to start from the highest tier that your system falls under. If you have any properties that have lead service lines, you need to add them to the sample pool. So like, we don't have any lead service lines throughout the distribution system, therefore we look at tier two. And tier two, if we have any properties that fall under that, we seek those out and we reach out to them and we ask them to participate in this routine monitoring. And then it goes to the next one. Yeah, as soon as we rule out one tier, we go to the next one.
So businesses and food manufacturers kind of fall out of that sort of sampling scheme. It's not
Yes.
a priority for the EPA.
Yeah.
Maybe it needs to be a priority for us.
Residential is priority and galvanized steel lines are priority. That's every sample location within this routine monitoring is galvanized, has a galvanized steel line. So when I'm talking about this data, Keys is tier 4, so they don't have galvanized lines because we haven't found one. Portsmouth, what I presented on last meeting, all of them are. All that data that I talked about was from galvanized service locations.
You talked about, obviously with school and particularly with Pease and beyond, do we have a special sampling program for daycare centers?
It falls under the same category as schools. Schools and daycares carry out their own sampling, but the system does not. And that's a New Hampshire thing. Other surrounding states and throughout the country, the public water system is the responsible party for sampling at those schools and daycares. New Hampshire is not that way.
So it's childcare licensing at the state level that monitors the lead testing of the water.
Yeah, it's called the Get the Lead Out program. And it's very specific to schools and daycares. And what Ken was talking about with the funding, that's being funded through this program. And so their sampling rounds that he referred to as well is all within compliance of this Get the Lead Out program. The public water system is kind of hands off on the front of schools and daycares in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that the schools are being well taken care of. Not as comfortable about what's happening with daycare centers.
Well, what I'm saying is it's the same. It's the daycare centers have to comply in the same fashion and in the same way as schools do.
Hopefully they are. We know that the schools are because we had them here talking about it.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Well, so
somewhere else at the state
I
level.
think that, yeah, in the state, actually, I think all the data is available on the state's Get the Lead Out program. You can actually go in there and look up the daycare and see what the results were for those 3 rounds of samples. And the state does follow up to see if there was anything that was above 5 parts per billion. I think it's sort of their trigger, which requires some sort of a treatment or.
Do they notify you if there's a hit?
No, we're not involved in that. They work with the daycares.
I think it's to isolate.
Not very comforting.
I think it's just to isolate the pool of schools and daycares from everyone else.
Yeah,
on a
I
public
understand
water
this.
system.
Actually, and part of that program is the public notification. So if they do go above that threshold, they're required. So there's a lot more regulatory side of that.
Mhm.
Be too much for us to handle that. That's all.
Who has her hand up? Thanks, Rich. Kim?
Yeah, so if you're a large scale soup manufacturer And so you're boiling off a lot of water, which seems like almost the opposite of flushing lines. Does lead concentrate in product? Do you know?
If
Makes
I'm
sense that it
having
would.
trouble,
Right, if the lead is not.
if they're boiling off.
So yes, if you're making hundreds of gallons of soup, the huge manufacturing vats, and you start with water and then they get up to very high temperatures and you do lose some moisture in that process. Does lead concentrate by being boiled?
It's left behind. So I don't know,
Yeah.
not as concentrated, and it's not going to elevate your concentration at all. But I think because, kind of back to what Vince was saying at the start of the meeting, it's such a heavy metal that it's just going to stay where it is. And so there's a lot of information out there. If you do have detections of lead within your home or from your kitchen faucet, boiling the water does nothing. Flushing it out is a different thing.
Well, I understand that as far as treatment, but if I start with 150 gallons of water in a recipe and I boil off 25% of that in the processing, then the lead would be left behind, and correct?
Yeah.
Higher concentration.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mason, I just have a question about the potholing. Is there funding for that? And that's through,
So I talked about that in the last meeting too.
Okay.
So we received a $3.5 million loan from the state. And so
okay.
we're taking a portion of that and using that toward galvanized steel replacements to help people replace their portions of their galvanized lines. But the majority of that funding is going to be used for the potholing efforts. Around $2 million is what we're estimating. And so with the partnerships with contractors, that money will be used at a 71% forgiveness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, I think we can move on. Thank you.
Welcome.
Slide, this is just the water supply update, as I always do here. Drought, we're still in a drought. This is just from Tuesday, posted today. We are in a moderate drought still. In a way, we're not seeing it too much. Our water levels, which I'll get to as we go to the next slide. Here's the precipitation. As you see, I mean, since June, we've been way below our monthly average precipitation, and it's been continuing this way. And hopefully we'll have a really snowy winter, because it's not looking good. It's interesting because last December, I remember we had this meeting and we were in a similar situation. We were still in drought. We're just coming out of it. And I was saying, well, next summer, if we don't get rain next spring, well, we're going to have to go into water use restrictions next summer. And thankfully, we got the rain in April and May, helped us through that, recharged our wells enough that got us through the summer. But here we are again, lower than we were last year at this time as far as our overall precipitation. So once again, yes, we might go into water use restrictions come next summer if we don't have a good winter and spring rainfall, snowfall. This is just another graphic of this. This is the 12-month rolling total precipitation, and we're way over there on the right. We are still hanging out down the lowest since 1998. It's been a long period, and it seems like since the drought has continued for a couple of years now, we are in what would be considered a long-term drought, where we don't quite recover from the year before. So hope things change, because another year like this and it'll be tough. We have I'll go another direction. This is another way that we look at cumulative precipitation over a water year, and a water year is from October through September. We started off low and we remained low. We had a little bit of that April and May bumped us closer to the average, which is the red line here. But after May, June, July, August, September, we just kept diverging from that where we should have been for normal precipitation. Just another way to see how bad it has been. That being said, our reservoir is great. Since we have a large watershed, it doesn't take a whole lot of precipitation to help fill that. And another thing that happens every October is Swains Lake, which is a pond upstream from the Bellamy. They lower the level in that lake. This year they lowered it, I believe, 30 inches because they need to do some work on the outlet structure there. So we get a little extra water, which all help to fill the Bellamy. And right now we're right at the spillway. It started flowing over a little bit earlier this week, and now it's just hanging there. So we have a full reservoir, and that's a good thing. So any rain, any snow melt that we get is going to help top off the
So
reservoir.
that was Swan Lake, what lake?
Swains Lake.
Swains Lake?
Yep. And they every year they draw that down just to protect the shoreline. People can work in their docks and stuff. So it's a benefit for us.
Yeah, awesome.
Here's a stream flow over the past year, 2 years here. The black line is our rolling stream flow for Oyster River, which is our corollary stream for the Bellamy. As you see, we've been hanging down the lower percentile since the summer, bumped up a little bit in September, October, but it's still very low. That's sort of an indication of our refilling of the Bellamy. Groundwater levels. See how much they dropped here. They bumped up a little bit, but we're still fairly low, lower than average. Groundwater levels are between 1 and 4 feet below our average groundwater levels. They're a little bit lower than last year, 1 to 2 feet on average, lower than we were last year. So they are low, but keeping in perspective that 1 to 4 feet in a well that has a 20 to 40 foot water column is just a small portion of that. So there's still a lot of water in the aquifers, thankfully, and with the rain, those will fill up quickly, but we are lower than usual. So we'll be watching that over the winter and spring, and fingers crossed for rain to help out our issue. Yeah, you can see this is just a more zoomed in version of that. As you see the green line right there, that's the Greenland well. And as you see, we kind of had a little bit of a recharge last year, but it didn't quite get back up to where it was. And now it's dropped off again. We need that other recharge to bring it back to more normal conditions. Get us back there. And our water production, since our last meeting, October, November, have been pretty close to average for our water demands. Again, we had a dry summer, so those peak months in July and August, and even into September, higher than average water use. And this is just a snapshot of year over year water supplied. Just to note here, we have dropped off from earlier, 2004 to 2015. We were closer to 1.6 million gallons a year, and now we're averaging, and it seems like it's steadying off in 2020 through now. We kind of have the annual variations due to weather conditions, but here's our 0.4. So our latest PFAS data, this is our 12-month rolling average of PFAS for our supply wells, all sources.
Can I ask a question going back on the supply stuff? I think I've raised this before, looking at the drought situation and potentially if we have another bad year having water restrictions. Again, what are we looking at in terms of the ongoing development in the communities, especially what we're seeing now with a number of large apartment complexes being built, one over by Christmas Tree Shop, the one proposed near my neighborhood on Portsmouth Boulevard, another 274 units, where are we projecting and what kind of discussions are we having with the planning board and those folks in terms of when we reach a critical point where the infrastructure isn't going to take care of the demand that we're
Well,
allowing to be.
We're selling less water than we have over the last 10 years. We sold 6% less. So right now we're looking at raising rates because we're not selling water. We're not using it. A lot of the buildings, this is very much from the NIMBY playbook, you know, the water is one of the first things to come out and the traffic. But a lot of the buildings being built, a lot of the homes being built or condos are second homes and third homes. And they have bathrooms that don't get used. But we also have the low flush toilets and stuff, you know what I mean, that have made water use more efficient. But that is not a, you know what I mean? Right now, we're looking at the other problem where we don't have enough people here using water, so we're gonna charge you more. Yeah.
The water efficiency.
Yeah, we just presented to the city council last meeting, so.
Yeah, water efficiency is, so there's sort of design standards for assuming 120 gallons per bedroom for a facility. You know, and we're seeing more like 120 gallons for a whole house, you know, so there's just those efficiencies that have been gained by that, especially for small apartments and things like that. So, so yeah, we haven't seen over the past 10 years, residential water use has been flat. Some commercial water use has gone up because we have some mixed use buildings where we have some, you know, residential and some commercial. Industrial has dropped off some. I think the industrial, and we're seeing that now, I think that's sort of why things are stabilizing now. But sure, with the more developments and more people, I think that will go up a little bit. But we still have a lot of reserves. We're still using and producing so much less water than we were 15, 20 years ago. You know, you look at the long-term history, even before this, it spiked way up and then it's come down.
Is the same hold true for the sewage?
Yeah.
End of it?
Yep.
It all comes back to like the capacity of the system to produce more water. I mean, and looking at this chart, that's a good one to stop on. We were over 1.9 billion gallons of water produced in 2005, and now we're all the way down to 1.4. I mean, it doesn't explain the, you know, the drought conditions that are happening now as opposed to 2005. But even now, our capacity is well above what we're producing. So, and if it comes down to it, we can drill more wells, and we have a backup supply well at Greenland that might be introduced to the system when we do upgrades to that facility over there. These are other things that we're constantly looking for in terms of, you know, land to tap into for more water. So
It's a good question though, because it comes down to the planning, long-term plans for Portsmouth. How is it going to be built out? You know, if a big big heavy water using industry came in, we would have to take a really close look at that to see how it would affect our capacities. You know,
I've been following, I used to live out in Tahoe, and they're getting all these data centers that are coming in and they're using up all the water, and they don't have much water out there. So they're freaking out. So I'm kind of watching that from a distance, but thinking of Portsmouth, you know,
Yeah.
what if, when, you know, yeah, what would we do?
Right.
Yeah.
Scenario like that, if they were going to use a lot of water, they would need to find some water.
Yep.
You know, help us find more water, which isn't the easiest thing to do around here.
Yeah.
You know.
Can I just ask a question? You said about drilling more wells, like my understanding, at least when the PFAS at Pease issue was very fresh, that we didn't have a lot of other options to drill other wells, and maybe that was just more like the Pease system, but I know the city even looked in other areas throughout the city to see if there were other resources, and it was my understanding that there wasn't. So, and that's why they had to filter all the water at Pease, because that wasn't an aquifer we could just abandon. So are there other opportunities? Because that's something new, I guess, for me.
I mean, it's a difficult process, obviously, to be able to do that and find an efficient well or an aquifer somewhere.
We've done a
But-
study. We have studies on the whole region of potential sources and source areas. There's no home runs out there right now.
Yeah.
All the good sand and gravel aquifers have been tapped. So the next step are the bedrock wells, which maybe you'll get 200 gallons a minute if you're lucky of a bedrock well, maybe 300 if you're really lucky. And then there's issues with water quality with those too. We don't have any bedrock wells in our system, so to introduce a bedrock well into our system would be hard.
Okay.
So it's that next plateau of if do we want to go there, only if we have to.
Okay.
But then there's the interconnection too.
For
Potentially
emergencies,
for emergencies.
and those resiliency type factors that considering, you know.
Thank you.
Do our our system is connected, for example, to Dover, right? Are we doing that?
Yeah, that's one of the interconnection
That's the
studies.
idea. How's Dover doing? Where's their water coming from? And I mean, are they?
They've made a lot of improvements lately with treatment systems. They have a big treatment plant that has re-engaged, and they're putting Hill Aquifer wells, and so they've been doing a lot of investments in more supplies in Dover. So I don't know the details on how many options
No,
they
of
have
course
out there,
not,
but they've been doing a lot of investments in their supply.
If we're gonna have emergency
Part of that.
connection,
It'll go both ways, right?
yeah, we wanna go, wanna be able to go both ways.
It's a big topic, yeah.
Oh, Kim's hand is up.
Kim?
Yeah, thank you. So, when we did our public health, assessment for the community health profile and all, many different groups of people mentioned that it was really important to them for their own sort of well-being and peace of mind that the natural environment be more protected. So in any of these planning or projections or production projects or thinking about them, is there a percentage of water that we just would say it's sacred, you can't go past this level because then no turtles could live or no, deer could drink? Is there any consideration for natural conservation in the discussions about water supply?
That's a good question.
Before I had this job, I did a lot of work for spring water companies where that was a big issue when you pump water out of the ground, how you're affecting the spring flow and if that's spring fed trout and everything else downstream from that. In this case, we have it, so the surface water bodies sort of connected to the aquifer, thinking now Portsmouth, Collins, Wells. You have the Great Bog area, which is an extensive wetland area. And that has not been a part of the consideration since it's such a large area relative to the volume of water that we're taking from that area. But it's a good question, and trying to monitor the impacts of that, I think, would be nearly impossible because it is such an extensive wetland. Greenland, there really isn't any water bodies near there that I don't think would be affected by that. And and when you're talking about the sand gravel aquifers that we're pumping from, the groundwater is already 10 to 30 feet below ground. So you'd have to go very far to see where the natural outflows from those aquifers would be, that base flow. And typically when you talk about that scale, the impacts are extremely low because it is more of a regional thing. But it's a good question. I know when we permitted the well 4 and well 5 up in Madbury, there was extensive monitoring of Johnson Creek that passed by those wells just to see if they would be affected by the pumping. And they weren't adversely affected because there's a clay barrier between the two. So, but it's such an interesting, and of course the Bellamy, that's just the water body that naturally, it was just a wetland at one point in time. So we've created this much larger water body there.
I think it comes back to like how shallow your well is, right? Like the deeper you go, the less you're going to affect on the surface.
Yeah.
But the shallower you are, there's dug wells that are very close to water bodies that are directly, taking water from that abutting source, like Milton 3 ponds, let's say. Like there are residential properties that have dug wells that are being fed by the pond or ponds. And so now you're drawing down more water from something like that rather than a well that might be 30, 40 feet down in the same location. You're not going to have, depending on the layering of the earth. That's what it comes back to. Yes.
Interesting. We go on to PFAS. Not much change since our latest sample was collected in November. Our Greenland well PFAS level of PFOA moved from 4.1 to 4.2, so slightly greater level of PFOA in Greenland well. Collins well, the November sample is actually below 4.
Yep.
We brought those levels down a little bit, and Portsmouth has been pretty steady. So no surprises with our latest sampling run. Oh, and one thing I did want to note, there's a link here to the website. We've made sure all the PFAS data has been updated through our July round anyway. I don't think we put our November round on there yet.
No,
But
we haven't.
all the historic data back to 2015 is available for each of our sources. And that does contain all 30 of the compounds. So this is just something that I wanted to bring up because I got a question about, there's concerns about peas and the idea that that people don't know what's going on out there. And I get it. To understand what's going on out there, you really need to be engaged and be involved. There's a lot happening. So I just wanted to give a really big picture view of this. So just like peas is considered an EPA Superfund site under the CERCLA program, which is administered by the EPA. The U.S. Air Force is a responsible party for the contamination at the Superfund site. And there's multiple contaminants at Pease over the years. PFAS is the latest big one, but going way back to when it became a CERCLA site, there was solvents and fuel and lead and all these other things that were going on out there. So it's been studied for a long time, since the 90s, like 91 is when it got turned over, something like that. So there's been environmental attention paid to Pease for a very long time now. So EPA administers the CERCLA program and oversees all of the cleanup and all the monitoring work that's being done at Pease. DES is sort of the supporting agency, so they help make what the EPA reviews the reports that are put out by the Air Force and things. So they help the process. And then the city of Portsmouth is really just the impacted stakeholder in the whole thing, since they impacted the groundwater out there. We've been affected. Ever since 2015, we've been on quarterly stakeholder calls with Air Force, EPA, DES, ATSDR, and the Department of Health and Human Services are all on these quarterly calls just to get an update of all the activities that are going on out there by the Air Force and their consultants. So there's a lot that's continuously happening out there. If you go to the next slide, there's ways to get information, not real easiest ways to do this. You need to get engaged. I'm thinking this might be a good topic to forward with SWAG in the future, to have more presence. The Air Force does have their own Restoration Advisory Board, the RAB, which they meet quarterly. Usually they meet this quarter, but those are open to the public. So people that are interested in knowing more about what's happening at Pease, they can come to those meetings and get involved. I also posted the websites here, so this will be available online. People can go in there and find these sites. EPA site is sort of the general history of the Pease Fund site. Air Force has, this link brings you to the BRAC, the base, something action closure website, which you can go into the administrative record. And once you go into the administrative record, you can click on BRAC, Pease, and then you'll have the list of all the sites at Pease. There's multiple locations where there's been contamination at Pease, and you can go into that site and search those records, and there's a lot of records on there. It'd be nice to have it condensed for everyone, so it'd be a little easier, but there's a lot of information. If you get the sort of the latest updates, you can get information there, as well as all the restoration, the RAB meetings. Those videos are also available on there. Those are all. And then there's a couple sites here that the DES have for more information. So I just wanted to put that out there. We should do more to get people engaged if they're concerned with Pease.
What are you hearing out for concerns?
Just that there's a lot of people out there that are concerned about Pease, concerned about their water. There was questions about private wells. And so you all know, part of what the Air Force has done is reached out to
anybody that has a private well within the area of Pease where the contaminant PFAS specifically might have migrated to, contacted them, sampled their wells that are over the state standards. They offered treatment or connection to the public water supply. There's still discussions with those that are between the 4 parts per trillion, which is what the EPA new regulation will be in 2029 or 2023, and the state level. So there's ongoing research there. But yeah, that's what I've heard. Have you heard? I don't get many calls like this, but
No, I mean, I do hear from people for various concerns, but I mean, I've certainly talked to a lot of Newington residents about private wells, but there's a lot of Newington residents on the RAB too, who I think are seen as resources in the community. So if people who aren't actively engaged, they know there's those key residents that seem to have a good pulse, but yeah, I hear people ask questions about the health study, or former veterans will reach out sometimes. So yeah. I see Kim has her hand up.
Yes, so my understanding of the whole PFAS issue when it started in 2014 was that, just as a global picture here, so there's been thousands and thousands and thousands of chemicals manufactured and dumped in our environment that aren't ever tested for. And then there was, I think it was the Lautenberg Act that required testing 5 to 10 compounds every 5 years or so to see what might be the emerging contaminants. And I believe that's how PFAS was discovered at Pease, and Portsmouth was one of the first places to test for it. And lo and behold, we had this big problem. My overall concern is that there are thousands of PFAS problems that just haven't been tested for. It's really nationally, but we're talking locally here. And so if I am correct in my understanding of that, the next emerging contaminants list that comes out, which is only a few compounds, could start this whole process over again with another identified compound. Do I understand that correctly?
I think it's every 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years, the EPA comes out with their well, it's a contaminants of concern list. And then from that, they come out with the UCMR, which is the Unregulated Contaminants Monitoring Program. So we just went through another round of that. That was the PFAS, lithium, and there was one other.
I was just saying, it was
20
PFAS compounds.
like
plus-
29 PFAS compounds and lithium.
Yes.
I think there's 30 on UCMR list that comes out every 5 years that we sample for. You know, prior to that, there was some cyanobacteria, cyanotoxins, I believe. So yeah, but yeah, like you say, there's thousands out there, and every 5 years we get a snippet of the top 30.
So is there a way to be more proactive and say, even if it's just looking at all the chemicals that were used on the base when it was an active base and saying, okay, here's 500 we're concerned about, let's start testing, so that people aren't having this false sense of safety because the things we know about when there's all these other things that they could possibly be consuming that just haven't been tested for.
I think the complication lies with the testing and on the lab front too.
Yeah.
It's probably equipment or technology that isn't up to speed either, you know, on these.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened with PFAS, is they were detected at a very high level, but the equipment could only go so low in terms of what they're detecting. And then over time, labs are now reporting down to 2 parts per trillion when we were detecting, you know, back in 2014, upwards of 400, 600 parts per million, which is like, how many more times? But I don't even know. Yeah, it's insane. So I think that's something to think about too. I mean, even though you're not aware of some of the compounds that haven't been like tested for, like PFAS has, the technology has to catch up too.
It's a problem too. If you test for something and you find it, what does it mean? There's no standard, there's nothing,
That too.
so it has
Yeah.
no meaning, because you don't know if there's a health effect or not health effect, and what the standard would be if there is, so.
But I do think that it could give us an indication.
It's hard, yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes on some of those things.
I can just say one thing, Kim. One of the recommendations in our report, and it has been in our report, is that if there are testing opportunities available to the city to look for compounds, we should participate in them. And not so much in this term, but in prior terms, there have been some opportunities, and we did identify a short chain PFPRA that was in the city water that hadn't been detected before. And then we also sent a sample and got total organic fluorine, and I think it was 164 parts per trillion of total organic fluorine. So that is something I agree with you, that if we do have these opportunities, because the labs do continue to advance, there's academic opportunities, that we should participate in them and see what we can find, but also understanding that sometimes we won't have all the answers, and we won't, and that can be uncomfortable for people. But also, if we have the opportunity to advance the science and get more information, we should do that too. And that's something we do recommend in our report, and something I think will continue. I haven't been offered any sampling opportunities recently, but when I have participated, and we've shared that information, even if we don't have all the answers.
Do we have a formalized process of sort of knowing when new testing procedures are available for different compounds? Is there anybody that's sort of responsible for that? Do we even need that? When you look at the scientific information that comes out on an annual basis, it can be overwhelming. So is there a method to become aware of what new testing capabilities there are that exist?
I don't know if there's a method. I mean, I know the city has what they're required to test for, and you obviously comply with that. When new things come up, I don't know. I don't know if you guys hear about them in conferences. I mean, sometimes I hear about it from researchers that I know, but yeah, I don't think there's like a formal way of people are informed. Some companies are out there, they'll try to market their products, so I'll see stuff like that, but it's a good question. Maybe a question for DES. I don't know.
I think it starts at that level. Like, that's when we would hear about it, is when the state gets involved from, that's the trickle down, right? The federal government, EPA, then the state, then us. And so, like, for us to dive deep into that with no backing of, like, research on health effects of this unknown thing, that's scary to us, because if you start letting people know, this is detected here, we don't know what it is, we don't know what it does to you, that's terrifying, like, not to say that we wouldn't participate, of course.
I agree with that, but I think maybe one outcome of the Safe Water Advisory Group could just be public education about how many thousands of unknown chemicals we run into on a daily basis, without making it Portsmouth specific, and without knowing what we have in the soil and water in Portsmouth. Just sort of, I'm always shocked at how many people don't know that there are these tons and tons of chemicals that never had any health studies associated with them, that were just used, manufactured, and that can still happen today. Like, there's not safety testing required for everything. So maybe we could consider a more global public education piece for something like that.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah, let's move on to the next part here, which is the project updates. There's a slide on each one of these that I'll cover a snippet of the projects that we're working on right now, just to keep you updated. The Smith and Harrison well cleaning project has started in mid-October, and we're planning to be wrapped up with that next week. In that process, we cleaned the screens of both of the wells, replaced the pumps. You see on the left there, that was pulled out of Harrison well. That had been in operation for about 10 years. And that's what happens when you keep something running for that long. So we ended up replacing that pump as well as a pump in Smith. And all the water, since it's Smith and Harrison wells, they have elevated levels of PFAS. We had to treat all the water that was used for cleaning the wells before it was discharged. So we had 2 large 22,000 gallon frac tanks, a cartridge filter system, and carbon vessels to treat all that water. We were curious how well it would work because of all the iron. When they clean the wells, there's a lot of iron that comes off these wells. So we had the frac tanks there to try to convert that to iron to insoluble form, settle it out before we put it through the filters because we were worried we were going to clog the filters. Thankfully, it all worked out well. There was enough capacity in the filters and the frac tank, so it worked well. It costs wise for that though, just so you know, the treatment part of that, $74,000 is what it cost to rent all this treatment equipment. That's the cost of having PFAS in your water, you know, for just cleaning a well. So the Bellamy Dam, we've been doing some work there, repairing some of the cracks and seeps in the dam. These cracks have been there. I've seen pictures of the dam right after it was built in the 50s and 60s when that seam on the right there had already been established, and it was already some of that effervescence showing through there. So this is great to finally get this done. They injected some urethane in the larger cracks. They used some mortar to fill in some of the concrete spalling. And they were able to do about 70% of it so far. It got too cold for them to continue, so they're going to finish that in the spring. They at least got the spillway taken care of while their water wasn't flowing over. So that's been a success. Mason already talked about the service line inventory and the letters that went out. We're going to be continuing Maple Haven in the spring first and then move over to Elwin Park area. And that's our first shot. We'll be doing that, and hopefully soon after that, we'll have contractors on board to help targeting other areas in the city. But we will do the same thing in other areas like we did in Elwin Park, notifying the neighbors ahead of time and marking where we're going to be doing the potholing. Greenland Well PFAS treatment is in design, final design right now. Construction is anticipated late 2026 through 2028. The design has 2 granule activated carbon vessels. And part of this process, we're going to be testing the old Greenland Well that's on site and seeing about getting that permitted as a backup supply, just for the resilience of the system there. And I just put the latest data from November here that the PFOA is still above 4. You know, there's that thought it might drop below the limit and we'd be good, but it's hanging right above 4. So we are still proceeding with treatment. Water storage tank painting projects. Those bid documents are coming together now. We're hoping to put that out to bid in early January. And the schedule of the painting will be Spinney Road tank first, spot painting the interior, full coat on the exterior. And then that'll be next spring. We have to do this sort of in the off seasons, not during peak demands in the summertime and not in the cold winter. So we're doing it springtime for Spinney Road, fall of 2026 for Newington Booster. Newington Booster is a full rehab. Need to get into that tank and fully repaint the inside and the exterior of that tank. It's in pretty rough shape. And then finally, spring of 2027, we'll be doing the Lafayette tank for a spot rehab on the interior and the exterior. That tank is just way too big a tank for what we need, and so long-term plan there will be replacing that tank. But so we just need to do the spot rehab and painting now to get us through another 10 years or so until we can afford a new tank. And this is another thing I wanted to cover a little bit. There's been a little bit of activity on this project. So this goes back to this is the Little Bay Water Transmission Main project where back to my dates here, in September 2023, we put the full project out to bid, and that was to install a 3rd water transmission main under the bay. Because those 2 mains that are there now are cast iron mains. They've been there since the 50s. There is known corrosion of those pipes. So the plan was to install a 3rd line made out of HDPE polyethylene pipe, so it won't corrode in the water. And we had the whole design for that project, put it out to bid. We had one bidder for $26 million, which was way over what we budgeted. I think we budgeted closer to 8 to 10. But the reason why that bid was so high was primarily because what was involved in installing an HDPE pipe. In order to put an HDPE pipe in, it all needs to be fused onshore. So that whole section of pipe would be one long connected piece of pipe. And then one day you pull it across the bay and you set it in and attach it. So in order to do that, you had to dredge on both sides, get the connection points all exposed and ready to go before you did that. So the actual dredging would have to stay open for a long period of time. And in order to do that without issues with turbidity and everything, you need to install a cofferdam, basically, which is a much bigger structure pounded into the sediments, a trestle that goes alongside that for a crane to be operating to dig it out. Very big process to do. And the work window to do that, so big part of this, to build all that infrastructure in a short amount of time wasn't possible. So permitting for this, we were only allowed to do in-water work from November 15th through March 15th. That was part of the original plan. And the contractor knew that there was no way that they could do the cofferdams and the trestle and all that within that window. So that $26 million that what they bid on was just saying, we know we could do this, we'll go into violation in doing it. So we included all the fees and everything else that would go along with it. That's why the price was so astronomically high. After we went through that process, we went back to the bidder and said, well, what's a better way to do? How can this be done? You know, to be able to meet the permit requirements and get the job done. So, well, actually back up, because this was in November 2023. And we quickly pivoted and put this back out to bid just to do the valve portion of this, to make sure that if anything happened to one of these mains, welcome. That's right. We'd be able to shut off one of the mains if we ended up with them. So that's why we quickly pivoted. 2024, we installed valves on both sides. So we have this confidence that if anything did happen to one of those, we wouldn't lose all the water coming to the city. We'd be able to manage. So that got us through that period. But we went through a redesign process where now the plan is, in order to do all this construction in the short construction window, we were able to get a 1.5 month extension from Fish and Game from October 1st through March 15th is sort of that construction window now. Because you don't want equipment out on the water when fish are migrating and such. So this is pretty strict requirements for the permitting part of it. So now the plan is to install ductile iron pipe, ball and socket pipe. So it'll be another iron pipe. Yeah, it will corrode, so it's not as ideal as the HDPE that we were hoping for, but it will be a lot easier to install. You don't need the big cofferdams. We can use what's called a bottom sealing filter barriers. So they can be set up, pounded into the sediments quickly, dredged, the pipe connected, and the base of the pipe is installed off a barge as it moves across the bay. And then they can bury it as they go. So a lot less impact will be able to be done within the permit period. It still will be expensive. The current engineer estimates around 14.5 million for that. So that's why it's still on our CIP. It's in an out year because we need to be able to pay for this. We've been going through the permitting process since that's been a big holdup too, to go through all of that. We have gotten movement. Just in November, we got the New Hampshire DES wetlands permit finally, and that starts kicking off a chain of other permits. So once we have that, now we are working with the Watershed Bureau, working on the water quality, the 401, the 404 water quality certificate. Once that's done, it will be able to go into the New Hampshire Coastal Zone Management Federal Consistency Review Period. So DES and Fish and Game and DOT are part of that review process. And then it can go to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and there's an individual permit. So this permitting has been going on a long time, but I feel like we've gotten over that first hurdle with the DES wetlands permit. That sort of gives a big go ahead for all these other agencies to do their thing. So all that being said, we're pushing forward with this. I'm hoping we can get the permits in place by next spring at some point. So I'll have the permits in hand, we'll have the final design for this, and then it'll be a shovel-ready project. And that could be very valuable for us for getting funds. If funds become available, we have a project ready for it, and we'll be able to do that. So it's kind of strategic right now. We're getting ready to do this project. Everything will be in place, and we'll be looking for funds. This project is also part of an important aspect of the emergency interconnection plan that's been done for the whole region. Yeah, we can provide water to Dover as part of that study with a few extra pipes into Dover, but for Dover to get water to us, it's important that these transmission mains are active, and having that third redundancy is really important for that overall connection. So I'm hoping we'll be able to get some funds through that process as well, if funds become available. So that's the long-winded history of the transmission project. I know that was a question that someone had recently, so I wanted to just go through where we were on that project.
On that, I remember going to the site walk and everything and the eminent domain and but the property owners there, are they aware of where this is in the stage or?
No, so the work that we did over on the Durham side, we extended the pipe right down to the high water mark.
Yeah.
So we won't need to enter that property anymore.
Okay, that's
Because we'll be able to go right up with barge to the dredging right there and enter in. So that's the plan.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, two quick PFAS updates on the community side. So the state of New Hampshire is part of a nationwide class action lawsuit against manufacturers of PFAS and aqueous film forming foam, or AFFF. That's the firefighting foam that contaminated Peas. The state of New Hampshire will receive $56 million from the 3M company's nationwide PFAS settlement of public drinking water system claims. The funds will be deposited in the New Hampshire Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund, and it will for distribution to eligible public drinking water systems across the nation. So we first learned that the state would be awarded this money back in 2024. However, more recently, it's been in the news that New Hampshire has just received their first installment of the money. About $8 million has been received so far. And I will turn it over to Al to talk about if the city's eligible for any of these funds or, what we can do to access them. But before, I just want to say one thing, that the companies that have made PFAS have profited billions and billions of dollars, and these chemicals have polluted the entire planet. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. They're everywhere. And so I think although this money is not a tremendous amount of money, it is a step in the right direction to holding the companies responsible that have created this problem and helping municipalities that are having to take the burden on of these systems that cost millions of dollars and their taxpayers have to pay. I'm just grateful that we do have these settlements. It's certainly not enough, but it's something. And so if the city of Portsmouth is eligible for any of these funds, or if we can see any of them to help any of the projects that we're working on, I will turn it to Al to mention.
Yeah, and I've learned a little bit more about this. So there are phases to how these funds are going to be coming through the state. As I understand it now, phase one funds have come through, the 45 million in total through the phase one portion of this. And if you remember, I don't know if it was last time Brandon came to speak, but he talked about how there was a period of time when New Hampshire sampled all the public water supplies to see if they were impacted by PFAS, because it was a statewide case against these companies. So through that process, every supply that had PFAS became automatically eligible for these funds. So there's been an allocation made to each of the sources that have PFAS in it already. So we are already on the list for all of our sources that have any amount of PFAS over 2 parts per trillion, I think is what they tested down to. So we already are there. Next, person I talked to said in the next few months, there'll be the procedures that'll be put out on how to get these funds. They're going to be just disbursement type funds where we'll be able to spend the money. I'm thinking the Greenland well, the design for Portsmouth and Collins well, we'll be able to just get reimbursed through that fund. I don't know how much that's going to end up being, but it's it's gonna help, you know?
Yeah.
And I think by the sounds of it, will be more than that 45,000 coming. Because I saw that number, and knowing that we have 8.5 million expected at Greenland, that's nothing for
Right.
money. So hopefully there'll be a little bit more. I was told, yeah, there's definitely not enough money to make things whole. I think they were hoping that maybe this is like 50% of what was really needed in the state. So it's good news that
Yeah.
we already are there. It's just a matter of getting the process in place. And it's going to be working through the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund is how these monies are going to be distributed.
So something we'll continue to track on the SWAG, you know, and as these funds become available, and it's a small step in the right direction of, you know, holding the polluters accountable. Certainly a lot more we have to do, but, okay, next slide, please. And then just one other update that I wanted to share on the community side of things. So in September, the New York Times published an article saying the Department of Defense quietly published a report on their website, pushing out the cleanup deadlines at 138 military sites across the country. This caught a lot of communities off guard because there was no announcement or explanation from DoD, just this article coming out. And this change actually does impact Pease. We were one of the sites on the list. So in 2024, I'm just trying to find my notes. Sorry, I just lost my book. Okay. So in a DoD report in June of 2024, our timeline for completing Pease's timeline for the remedial investigation and the feasibility study, which is 2 steps in the circle process, Al kind of briefly talked about that, was July of 2025. So that was our initial deadline on this report of 2024. Well, in this new report that was quietly published, which is what this article is referencing, the Pease deadline for the RI and the FS got moved out to September of 2031 with no explanation, no announcement, no nothing. I did reach out to the Air Force, the project manager at Pease, and I said, hey, what's this article about and why did our deadlines get pushed out? And he said, you know, really, we did have some minor delays that they've been upfront about in terms of data gaps and collecting more information, but that they think, or what he thinks, he said, I am told the 2031 date stated in the article is a timeline estimate that included additional CERCLA processes beyond the RI and the FS. And it was mislabeled in the article. So that's what we're hearing. We're not seeing any significant delays, but it is a bit concerning that DoD had one report and then published another one with these extended timelines. And it wasn't just Pease, it was 138 other sites. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to flag that I'm really grateful that our congressional delegation in New Hampshire on November 17th did write a letter to DoD Secretary Hegseth asking for more transparency, and wanting a response by December 1st. It's now December 4th. To the best of my knowledge, I am not aware of a response that has come back from DoD, but wanting a detailed timeline as to any delays that will be happening at Pease. They also want the community to be informed if there are going to be significant delays to clean up or any efforts. And they also want a website with future timelines, including justifications provided to local and state authorities and advance notice before things are finalized. And this is actually, that request is under Section 321 of the National Defense Authorization Act from fiscal year 2024. So again, something we're going to continue to track. I was blindsided by the change in the date. The Air Force is saying it was an error and it included a more comprehensive process. We'll have to wait and see, and we'll keep you posted on what updates our congressional delegation may get a response from the Department of Defense. And so I believe that is it for my PFAS. Did anyone have any questions on those? Okay. All right, so now we move into the last thing on our agenda, and it is our SWAG end of year summary and recommendations to the City Council. And so we talked about this at our last meeting, but historically we have issued a report or the summary to the City Council at the end of our terms. So this will be the end of a 3rd term that we've had as a SWAG. And we do have the other 2 reports that are available online that we have shared with you. If you go to the next slide, please. So really what I wanted to do is I have shared the draft with everybody, and in speaking with Al tonight, our goal is to have this finalized and have all of you review it and weigh in and share any feedback, but have it finalized by the end of next week so we can submit it into the city council for their December 22nd meeting. So I know there's a few members who can't be here tonight, and it's, the document, it is lengthy, but I feel like it's, there's different parts of it that you can kind of move through quickly. So I just hope that all of you will take a look at it and share any feedback or suggestions or edits that you have for us. But really, the top level items, if you will, that we want to recommend to the city council is we certainly want them to reinstate our group next term for another 2 years. And we've also talked about this multiple times in the last year plus about revising our mission. And we all did vote to recommend this revised mission, which is here on the screen. So that's another big thing that we would like the city council to do. And then we also would like them to adjust the number of community members from 3 to 5 to allow increased community involvement. We've actually had a couple people put in applications to be on the SWAG. And so I think that's great. And I think it would be great to have more engaged citizens. Everyone on this group is incredibly busy and they're involved in multiple other boards and other activities and events throughout the city. So I know that not everyone can make it, and having a couple more residents will just allow more participation. I'm aware of one candidate who has attended a meeting in the past. His name is Shan Zudima, and he submitted his application. And he works at UNH. He studied hydrogeology. He's interested in water systems. So he has a professional background in water systems and is a Portsmouth resident. And I think he'd be a great addition to the SWAG. So his application went in to the best of my understanding. And then I am aware of another gentleman who applied to be on the SWAG, Daniel Finan, but I don't know much about him, but nonetheless, I think it's great that we're seeing more residents express interest. And we do have a vacancy because we did have one SWAG member resign, but it would be great to be able to add a couple other members. So, and then, we need to reappoint our members. And so by the structure and the way we were set up is we have 2 city councilors, we have our community members, we have a representative from the City of Portsmouth Fire, City Water Department, City Health Department, a school board representative, an environmental scientist, a state representative, and a state senator. So we would want to continue with appointing those people as well.
Andrea, if I might, just technicality for the report. The language on that might be that we request the mayor consider appointing because it's his decision.
Yes, I apologize. Thank you for clarifying that. So yes, it would ultimately be up to the mayor. These are just the recommendations that we are searching for, but he has the final say. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and then so these are the list of recommendations like overall in the report. So I went through a few of these already. We're going to be reinstated in 2026. That our mission should be revised, and then just a few others that will continue to monitor and report on developments regarding contaminants of emerging concern and discuss advanced PFAS testing opportunities to get ahead of additional PFAS that may be in the water that's not currently tested for. So Kim, that kind of goes to your point in the discussion we had earlier. Next slide. The SWAG will continue to monitor legislation at state and federal levels that address water quality issues in the city and support with testimony on legislation. Sorry, I can't read all of it, but we would support legislation that we would monitor developments and advances in science regarding PFPRA. That's that short chain compound that we did find a couple years ago. The SWAG will continue to monitor the lead testing and remediation efforts at the Portsmouth School Department. We had Ken Lynchy here tonight, and it sounds like he'll be doing extra testing and could certainly be invited back to another SWAG meeting. The SWAG will continue to endorse the city's design and construction of the Greenland Well and the preliminary designs of the PFAS treatments for the Collins and Portsmouth Well. The SWAG will continue to support the city's ongoing discussions with the Air Force to pursue reimbursement for PFAS-related treatment for the Portsmouth and Collins Well, as they are the responsible party. The SWAG will continue to recommend the city consider providing alternative disposal options for PFAS containing items. So this is something that came up in our last SWAG. So we know we have a hazardous substance day or hazardous waste day, or a couple times a year where you can bring in, different types of paints or things like that you can't normally recycle. And there was this talk of, is there an opportunity to do that? To the best of my knowledge, we haven't identified a way to be able to do that, but it's something for us to continue to keep in mind. The SWAG encourages the city to continue to be engaged on developments at the Pease Trade Port that could potentially have impacts to wetlands and the drinking water. That really came about a couple years ago. We had the Millionaire Company who was talking about putting a fuel farm at Pease, and there were concerns from the community regarding not only the impacts to wetlands for that, but also that it would be in proximity to the Haven well, which is the largest drinking water well in the Pease system. So to the best of our knowledge, that project is not moving forward. But if there's other developments like that coming up, it's something we should be paying attention to. The SWAG continues to support funding for free lead water testing to residents, as this is a valuable service to our residents in a city with old housing stock and documented exposure to some residents. The SWAG strongly recommends the city participate in testing opportunities for emerging contaminants and contaminants of concern, especially when no cost to the city, to better understand what contaminants may be in the water supply. So again, we haven't had any recent opportunities come our way, but if we do, we should continue to participate in those. Next slide. The SWAG supports the city's efforts to identify and purchase conservation easement land around the Bellamy Reservoir and within its watershed to ensure long-term protection of the city's largest drinking water supply. The SWAG promotes the city's cyanobacteria monitoring at the Bellamy Reservoir and the collaboration with New Hampshire DES and their consultants to develop the best approach to cyanobacteria and cyanotoxin management. The SWAG recommends the city continue to request routine updates from the city of Dover regarding their monitoring and remediation efforts of the southern plume of the Tolan landfill, also known as the Dover Municipal Landfill, to ensure contamination from the landfill does not negatively affect the Bellamy Reservoir water quality. Okay, last slide, I promise. And though not directly related to the city's drinking water system water quality, some SWAG members of the committee had the following recommendations. The SWAG should discuss the potential impacts of drinking water from Coakley landfill in more depth at future meetings. And the SWAG should advocate for PFAS testing of water running off the artificial turf fields to determine if there are environmental impacts of the surrounding wetlands and stormwater drainage system. And I believe that's it. Next slide. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me. I know that was a lot, but that's what the recommendations are from the SWAG to the city council. So I would welcome any thoughts, feedback, recommendations. And again, just knowing that the plan is to send our overall report by the end of next week, so next Friday. So if you can't think of anything tonight, or it's just a lot to take in, which I fully appreciate, there's time to digest it and send any comments to Al and I.
Just some of this stuff we're repeating, right? Like I saw, I was just on the report for the year that we asked the city if we should test the water running off of the artificial turf fields. And they said, they give us an answer. Then we're gonna ask him again. We don't have any data on it. You know what I mean? Like we don't have any data on what the water quality was there before the turf fields. So there's no way to tell if it's from the turf field or not.
That's the biggest problem.
I know, I remember the report and everything. Obviously, I was very involved in that process. But I don't think we should.
So you want to take that one off?
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
think we should be asking questions we've already
Okay,
asked.
all right. Any other feedback? Suggestions? Okay. All right. With that, I know there was a couple other things I just wanted to mention when that came to the report. We will be adding, so in the report, I have like a space holder for the school lead update, which we did get tonight. So I will be adding some information into the report about that. And then also we do have a part about the drought in there, so it might be important to just add, we're still in the drought. So we'll probably add something about that. And then I know there was a suggestion too, to maybe some of the things that we've already accomplished kind of move higher up in the report. So that will move that up as well. And then the suggestion to remove the artificial turf testing. So once those changes are made, we'll go ahead and circulate a revised report to all of you. And again, just any comments or feedback, if you could get it to us by the end of next Friday, so we can get it to the city council, that would be great. Before we go to public comment, I just want to recognize that there are 2 members on our SWAG who won't be continuing with us in the next term because their time as an elected official has ended. So that would be Genevieve and Councillor Lombardi. And I just want to thank you both for your contributions on the SWAG and for your service to the city. And it's been a pleasure working with you both. And I really appreciate all that you've done, and you'll be missed. So yeah, thank you very much. So with that, public comment. I don't see any members of the public here. So I think we can conclude our meeting. I think what I will say in the past, when our SWAG has been renewed, it's usually like sometime in January or so, and we tend to meet in like March. So just to give people an idea, you know, should the SWAG be renewed by the next city council, we would be meeting until probably March of next year.
That's good. Great.
So, okay,
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank
thanks everybody.
Yeah, you. Motion to adjourn?
Okay. Great holiday too, everybody.
Too, thank you.
This is my email from before.
Nothing about.
Before we